The sound of platinum snapping is quieter than you would think, but in that silent dining room, it sounded like a gunshot. My 17-year-old niece, Brianna, did not even look at me. She was live streaming to her followers, the ring light reflecting in her eyes like two tiny, artificial moons. She had snatched the vintage bracelet right off my wrist moments earlier, holding it up to the camera and laughing as she called it flea market trash. When it did not fit over her hand, she did not unclasp it. She yanked. The delicate safety chain sheared off, and 80 years of history clattered into her half-eaten bowl of soup. My brother Jason did not look up from his steak. My sister-in-law, Tanya, just sipped her mimosa and smiled that tight, superior smile she reserved for me. "Oops," she said, her voice light and unbothered. "It was ugly anyway. You do not need jewelry, Audrey. You do not have anyone to impress." That was it. 3 years of paying their bills, erased in 1 second of casual cruelty. I did not scream. I did not cry. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened my banking app. Before I show you exactly what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you, tell me in the comments, what is the one thing you have done for family that you instantly regretted? The dining room was silent, except for the low hum of the smart HVAC system, a system I had installed 6 months ago when Jason complained about his allergies. I did not leave. I did not storm out. I simply sat at the head of the table, my phone resting flat on the placemat. "Do not look so tragic," Tanya said, her voice dripping with that specific brand of condescension she reserved for service staff and me. "It is just metal. Audrey, Jason, tell your sister to stop being dramatic." Jason sighed, rubbing his temples as if my reaction to having my property destroyed was the inconvenience here. "Audrey, do not make a scene. Brianna is just being a kid. We will buy you a new one from the mall or something." I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw Jason, my older brother, a man who had not paid a mortgage bill in 3 years but drove a leased luxury SUV. I saw Tanya, wearing a silk designer blouse that cost more than my first car. It is a fascinating psychological phenomenon, really. The delusion of power of the empty wallet. Tanya believed she was the matriarch of this estate because she lived in it, because she wore the clothes of a wealthy woman, and because she ordered people around. She confused the ability to spend money with the power of controlling it. She thought status was something you could put on a credit card. She did not understand that real power is silent. Real power is being the one who signs the checks, not the one who cashes them. She looked at me and saw a 29-year-old IT girl who fixed her Wi-Fi. She forgot that my actual job title is Elite Cybersecurity Architect for federal contractors. She forgot that I do not just fix systems. I dismantle them. "You are right," I said, my voice terrifyingly level. "She is just a kid. And kids do not need $85,000 a year music conservatories." Tanya frowned, her mimosa glass pausing halfway to her lips. "What are you talking about?" I did not answer her directly. I tapped my phone screen twice. The large 80-inch television mounted on the wall behind Jason, another gift I had paid for, flickered to life. It mirrored my phone screen. Everyone turned to look. They saw the banking app interface. They saw the recurring transfer scheduled for the 1st of the month. The label read, "Angel Investor Grant, Brianna." I tapped the button that said Cancel Recurring Transfer. A confirmation box popped up. I tapped yes. Then I tapped Close Account. The screen flashed red, the words large enough for everyone to read clearly. Scholarship terminated. Funding revoked. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and expensive. Tanya froze. The color drained from her face so fast she looked like a wax statue. Jason dropped his fork. It clattered against the china, a dull echo of the bracelet snapping moments before. "What did you just do?" Tanya whispered, her voice trembling. I smiled, a cold, sharp expression that felt foreign on my face but entirely necessary. "I just saved myself $340,000. "You thought the angel investor grant was from the school?" I asked, leaning forward. "You thought the conservatory just handed out full rides to mediocre violinists because they liked her spirit? It was me, Tanya. It was always me. I created the trust. I funded the grant. And now, I am revoking it." I stood up. The chair scraped against the hardwood floor, a harsh, final sound in the expensive room. I smoothed my skirt, feeling the cool fabric against my fingertips. "I am done," I said. "Enjoy the house. Rent is due on the 1st. I turned my back on them and walked toward the double mahogany doors. I was 3 steps away from freedom. 3 steps away from the cold, clean air of a life without them. But I never made it. "Alexa!" Tanya screamed, her voice cracking with a vicious, cornered animal desperation. "Activate Lockdown Protocol Alpha." The response was immediate and mechanical. A heavy thud echoed through the walls as the magnetic locks engaged. Then came the grinding mechanical whine of steel shutters descending over the floor-to-ceiling windows. I watched the gray daylight disappear, replaced by the artificial glow of the recessed lighting. The house I had paid for, the sanctuary I had built to keep them safe, had just become a cage. I pulled the door handle. It was solid rock, locked. Tanya stood by the kitchen island, her chest heaving. She was not calling for help. She was tapping furiously on her phone, her thumbs moving with a terrifying speed. "You think you can cancel my daughter's future and just walk away?" she hissed. "You are not leaving until you reauthorize that transfer." I turned to face her. My pulse was hammering in my throat, but I forced my breathing to remain slow. "This is false imprisonment, Tanya," I said. "Open the door." Tanya laughed. It was a wet, breathless sound. "No. It is self-defense." She held up her phone. "Look at this, Jason. Look at what your sister just sent to Brianna." Jason took the phone. I saw his eyes widen. He looked at me, confusion warring with fear. I walked closer. On the screen was a text message conversation. The sender ID was my name. The number was my number. But the words were not mine. "I am going to kill you for breaking my bracelet. I have a knife." Spoofing, I realized aloud. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "You spoofed my number. You used an app to fake a threat." Tanya nodded, her eyes bright with a dangerous, frantic energy. "Jason, call 911. Tell them your sister is having a psychotic break. Tell them she has a weapon and she is threatening Brianna. Show them this text." Jason hesitated. He held the phone like it was burning his hand. He looked at me. He knew I would never hurt Brianna. He knew I had spent the last decade fixing his mistakes, paying his debts, and cleaning up his messes. He knew, deep down, that his wife was lying. But then Tanya yelled, and her voice shifted. It wasn't frantic anymore. It was commanding. "She is destroying our family, Jason. She is taking everything from us. We have to protect ourselves." I watched the conflict in his eyes die. I watched the brother I used to protect fade away, replaced by a man who was terrified of losing his comfort. It is a specific kind of horror. Watching the people you love normalize cruelty. It is the trap of the survivor mentality twisted into abuse. Tanya had convinced him that accountability was an attack. She had convinced him that preserving their lifestyle justified destroying my life. In that moment, to Jason, betraying me wasn't evil. It was necessary. It was survival. He wasn't choosing between truth and lies. He was choosing between his wife's approval and his sister's freedom. He made his choice. He lifted his own phone to his ear. I watched his thumb hit the green button. 911, he said, his voice shaking just enough to sound convincing. "Yes. I need police immediately. My sister is screaming. She is violent. She has a knife." I stood there, leaning against the locked door, listening to my brother sign my arrest warrant. I did not beg him to stop. I did not try to explain. I realized then that I wasn't fighting family. I was fighting a hostage situation where the hostages had fallen in love with their captor. The air in the sealed room was heavy, recycled, and stagnant. I leaned my back against the cold steel of the shuttered door, the metal pressing into my spine. Across the room, Jason was still on the phone with the dispatcher, his voice pitching up into a performance of panic that would have been impressive if it weren't lethal. "Yes, she is still here," he said, breathless. "She is refusing to drop the knife." I closed my eyes for a second, and the ghosts of this house rose up to meet me. 3 years ago, on a rainy Tuesday, Jason had sat in my old apartment, weeping into his hands. His credit was shot. His landlord was evicting them. He begged me for a loan, for a cosign, for anything. I didn't just give him a loan. I bought the house. I put down the cash. I handed him the keys and told him it was a fresh start. I remember the way he hugged me then, holding on like I was a life raft. Now, I opened my eyes and watched that same man look at me with dead, shark-like eyes, while he lied to armed officers to get me arrested. The life raft had become an inconvenience, so he was puncturing it. "Please hurry," Jason said into the phone. "My daughter is terrified." In the corner, Tanya was kneeling next to Brianna. She wasn't comforting her. She was directing her. I watched her whisper instructions, fixing Brianna's hair to look more disheveled, pinching her arm to make sure there would be a mark. They were building a crime scene, and I was the prop. I looked at the floor, specifically at the vents. I remembered installing the dedicated cooling system for the basement server room. Tanya had complained for weeks about the hum of the fans. "It vibrates the floorboards," she had whined. "Can't you turn it off?" "It pays the mortgage, Tanya," I had told her. "It is mining crypto. It keeps the lights on." It was a lie, of course. It wasn't mining crypto. But telling them it was generating free money was the only way to get them to leave it alone. It was the only way to get them to plug their own devices into that network, thinking they were skimming off the top of my hard work. I had spent years laying fiber optic cables like tripwires, and they had spent years happily tripping over them. I realized then that I had never been their sister. I had been their host organism. I was the body they fed on, the structure that kept them warm. And today, the parasites had decided they were strong enough to kill the host. Tanya stood up, smoothing her dress. She walked over to the wine fridge and poured herself another glass of champagne. The flute clinked against the granite counter, another thing I paid for. "You are going to jail, Audrey," she said, taking a sip. Her voice was conversational, light. "And while you are rotting in a cell awaiting bail, I am going to go downstairs and sell those loud servers of yours. They must be worth a fortune on the second-hand market. Consider it severance pay." I looked at her. I didn't see a sister-in-law. I saw a line item that needed to be redacted. I checked my watch. 14 minutes until average police response time for a priority domestic call. I did not say a word. I just waited. The ledger was full. It was time to close the books. Tanya poured herself another glass of champagne, the bottle sweating on the granite countertop. She took a long, satisfied sip, her eyes darting between me and the clock on the microwave. She was already calculating the timeline. Arrest, arraignment, asset seizure. In her mind, she had already won. She thought my silence was the silence of the defeated. She thought I was standing there paralyzed by the sudden, violent dismantling of my life. She was wrong. I was silent because I was working. I tapped the face of my smartwatch. To Jason, it probably looked like I was nervously checking the time, counting down the minutes until the police arrived to drag me away. But I wasn't checking the time. I was checking the uptime logs of the server rack humming beneath our feet. They think I fix printers. They think I am the girl you call when the Wi-Fi is spotty or when you forget your email password. They see a tech support worker because that is what they need to see to feel superior. They forgot, or maybe they never bothered to ask, that my actual job title is forensic architect for federal defense contractors. I do not build firewalls to keep hackers out. I build digital cages to keep criminals in. I swiped left on the small watch screen. The interface shifted from a clock face to a command terminal. The server downstairs wasn't mining Bitcoin. It wasn't generating passive income to pay the electric bill. It was a node. A passive, high-speed data funnel that recorded, encrypted, and mirrored every single kilobyte of traffic that passed through this house's network. For 3 years I had watched them. I watched Jason log into offshore gambling sites using a VPN he thought was secure. I watched him rack up debts that would make a bookie blush. I watched Tanya research how to hide assets during a bankruptcy. And then, about 18 months ago, I watched the traffic change. It wasn't just gambling anymore. It was structuring. It was layering. Jason had gotten involved with a local syndicate that needed clean digital channels to wash cash, and he had volunteered my high-speed connection as the laundromat. I could have stopped them then. I could have blocked the ports, flagged the IPs, or just evicted them. But I didn't. Because in the federal justice system, timing is everything. If I had reported them a year ago, the total amount laundered would have been around $80,000. That is a misdemeanor in some jurisdictions, a low-level felony in others. Probation, maybe a fine. They would have walked away, claimed ignorance, and spent the rest of their lives blaming me for ruining their business venture. They would have been victims. I needed them to be convicts. I needed the number to hit a specific threshold. I needed it to cross the line where the sentencing guidelines shift from discretionary to mandatory. I swiped again. The real-time audit flashed on my wrist. Total transaction volume. Verified. $492,000. Close. So close. But not enough to guarantee the decade-long sentence I wanted. I frowned. Had I miscalculated? Then, the log refreshed. A pending transaction from yesterday afternoon cleared. It was labeled, Wedding Planner Consultation, Tanya's code for a wire transfer to a shell company in the Caymans. Transaction amount. $10,000. The total ticked upward. The numbers settled, glowing a crisp, bright green against the black background of my watch face. Total volume. $502,000. 0. There it was. The magic number. $502,000. The federal threshold for major financial crimes involving wire fraud and money laundering. Above $500,000, the sentencing guidelines stop being a suggestion and start being a mathematical certainty. Mandatory minimums. No parole, no first-time offender leniency. Tanya smirked at me over her glass. Certain she had won, never realizing she had just toasted to her own arrest. She thought she'd trapped me in a house. She didn't know I'd trapped her in a felony. The trap sprang. Blue police lights sliced through the steel shutters. The front door exploded inward under a battering ram. Police, get on the ground. Chaos followed. Tanya dropped her glass, fell to her knees, and screamed that I had a knife. that I was dangerous. I stayed still, hands raised. Too still. They searched me. A serrated knife came out of my pocket, the one she had planted earlier. The cuffs snapped shut. As they dragged me outside, Tanya smiled. She had the story, the weapon, and the house. She thought she'd bought herself hours to destroy the evidence. She made one mistake. I stopped in the rain. Check my wallet, left pocket. Behind my license was a DOJ card. I'm a federally protected cybercrime asset, I said. Call the number. Dispatch went silent. Then urgent. Do not transport. Federal units inbound. The cuffs came off. I walked back toward the house as 3 black SUVs screeched in. FBI agents flooded the lawn. Tanya's confidence shattered. The server downstairs, I said calmly, is a federal honeypot. I built it, and for 3 years, I recorded everything. $500,000 in wire fraud, past the sentencing threshold. No deals. No parole. This is why I waited, I told her. You needed to steal enough. The cuffs clicked again, this time on Tanya and Jason. Weeks later, I sat alone in a quiet D.C. apartment. I deleted every file. I hung the broken bracelet on my wall as a receipt. I didn't build a prison to punish them. I built it so I could leave. If you're afraid to cut off toxic people, understand this. Solitude isn't lonely. It's quiet. And it's freedom.